Stop. Look at this building. On March 25, 1911, 146 people died inside it. Most of them were young women. Most of the doors were locked. One girl went up when everyone else went down, and she lived to tell the world what those locked doors had done. For 90 years, she kept telling it. Her name was Rose Freedman. She was born Rose Rosenfeld on March 27, 1893, in Vienna, Austria-Hungary. Her family ran an import and export business. Vienna in 1893 was a city of ornate facades and grinding labor, a place where one world pressed hard against another. Rose grew up knowing what that pressure felt like. Around 1909, when she was 15 or 16 years old, her father visited New York and was drawn by what he found there. The family followed him across the Atlantic. Rose arrived in the United States at an age when most immigrant girls arrived with a single, immediate priority: find work that paid. New York in 1909 was producing more women's clothing than any city on earth. The garment trade ran on an almost unlimited supply of young Jewish and Italian immigrant women willing to work for low wages in cramped upper floors. The work was close, repetitive, and fast. The floors were scattered with fabric scraps and flammable materials. The buildings were old. The fire escapes were, in some cases, decorative. The Triangle Waist Company occupied the top 3 floors, the 8th, 9th, and 10th, of a 10-story building at 23 to 29 Washington Place in Greenwich Village. Its owners were Max Blank and Isaac Harris. They employed roughly 500 workers, most of them immigrant women, producing women's blouses. Rose Rosenfeld worked the 9th floor as a sewing machine operator. By the spring of 1911, she was 17 years old. She had 2 days left before her 18th birthday. The Triangle factory was not exceptional in its conditions. Hundreds of shops in Lower Manhattan operated on the same model. Long hours, low pay, piece-rate wages that rewarded speed and punished slowness. Workers who moved too slowly or spoke out could be dismissed. Workers who left their stations without permission could be docked. The Washington Place door on the 9th floor, one of the 2 staircases down, was routinely kept locked. The owners used the lock to prevent theft and to control when workers could leave. Locked doors in factories were not unusual in 1911. They were not illegal. They were simply a cost of doing the work, borne entirely by the workers. No one who worked the 9th floor of the Ash Building needed to be told what a locked door meant in a fire. They simply had not been shown one yet. On Saturday, March 25, 1911, quitting time was approaching. It was nearly 4:40 in the afternoon. The fire started in a scrap bin on the 8th floor. Within minutes it had spread through the fabric remnants and tissue paper that covered every surface. The Green Street staircase on the 8th floor was in flames. Workers there managed to escape upward or downward before the passage closed. On the 9th floor, the workers who ran to the Washington Place door found it locked. They pulled at it. It did not open. The building's single exterior fire escape, attached to the rear wall, collapsed under the weight of the people trying to use it. The fire was extinguished in roughly 18 minutes. In those 18 minutes, 62 people leapt from the windows. By the time the fire was over, 146 workers were dead, 123 women and girls, and 23 men. It was the deadliest industrial disaster in the history of New York City. Rose Rosenfeld did not go down. She went up. She followed the company's executives from the 9th floor up the staircase to the 10th floor, and from there to the roof. On the roof of the adjacent building, the New York University Law School building, students and faculty had gathered. They extended ladders across the gap between the two rooftops. Firefighters assisted. Survivors crossed over. Rose was among them. She was 17 years old, 2 days from her 18th birthday. She crossed to safety while, beneath her, the windows of the ash building filled with fire. She would describe what she saw from that roof for the rest of her life. According to her New York Times obituary, she described seeing young women in burning shirtwaists fall from the 9th floor windows. The bodies were laid out on the sidewalk. Police lines kept the crowds back. The pier at Pier 26 on the Hudson River was designated as a temporary morgue. Within hours, tens of thousands of people were moving through Lower Manhattan. Family members, neighbors, strangers, trying to identify the dead. Of the 146 killed, 47 could not be identified by appearance alone. The city held a public funeral procession on April 5, 1911. More than 140,000 people marched in the rain-down Fifth Avenue. It was one of the largest labor processions New York had ever seen, and the marchers were not yet demanding legislation. They were still, in those weeks, simply mourning. The mourning turned quickly. The New York Factory Investigating Commission was established in the months following the fire. Francis Perkins, who had witnessed the fire from the street, became one of its leading advocates. Between 1911 and 1914, New York State passed more than 36 new factory safety and labor laws. The laws covered sprinkler systems, fire drills, maximum working hours, and, directly because of March 25, 1911, the locking of exit doors during working hours. The factory owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, were tried for manslaughter in December 1911. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Roughly 100 witnesses testified. The prosecution's central argument was that the Washington Place door on the 9th floor had been locked and that the owners knew it was locked. The defense successfully argued that the prosecution had not proven the owners knew the door was locked at the time of the fire. On December 27, 1911, the jury acquitted both men. Rose Rosenfeld had survived the fire. She had survived the weeks that followed. She would remember what the jury found, and she would carry it with her for 90 years. She later said that in the aftermath of the fire, one of the factory's owners, or someone acting on an owner's behalf, approached her and offered money to change her account of the locked doors. She refused. That is her own account of what happened. No independent 1911 document confirming the approach was found in the trial record, and Rose Rosenfeld is not named among the witnesses identified in the surviving trial transcript. But she repeated the story consistently for the rest of her life, and every source that recorded her words recorded the same claim. She was offered money to say the doors were not locked, and she said no. The doors were locked. She knew it, and she would not say otherwise. The next chapter of her life ran through a marriage, 3 children, and a second career she began in middle age. Around 1927, She married Harry Freedman, who operated a typewriter business in New York. They had 3 children. 2 of them contracted polio. Rose nursed them. After her husband died, she found herself without income. She was not young. She enrolled in business school. At approximately 59 years old, she was hired by the Mark Cross Pen Company. She later worked in public relations for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. She retired at roughly 79. She moved to the Los Angeles area in her 90s. The decades passed. The fire receded into history, into textbooks and labor law footnotes, into the institutional memory of the ILGWU and the AFL-CIO, into the Kiel Center archive at Cornell University, where the trial transcripts and survivor photographs were kept. The survivors who had been on the 9th floor and the 8th floor and the 10th floor on March 25, 1911 grew old and died, one by one, until there was only one of them left. By the late 1990s, Rose Freedman was the last known survivor of the Triangle Waste Company fire. The Kiel Center at Cornell University, the world's foremost repository of Triangle fire materials, identified her that way in the caption on her photograph in their collection, Rose Rosenfeld Freedman, the last known survivor of the Triangle fire. She was in her mid-90s, then her late 90s, then 100, then past it. She did not grow quieter. In December 2000, she was the first person profiled in a new PBS documentary series called The Living Century. She was 107 years old. The documentary's director reportedly described her as the last living voice of the event. She spoke on camera about the fire. She spoke about the locked door. She spoke about the girls she had seen fall from the windows. She spoke about the executives who she said had more concern for money than for the people working for them, that the workers, in her telling, did not count for much against the value of the building and the product. She had been saying these things for 90 years. She was still saying them at 107. On February 15, 2001, Rose Freedman died at her home in Beverly Hills, California. She was 107 years old. She had been born on March 27, 1893. She had been 17 years old, 2 days from her 18th birthday. On the afternoon, the 9th floor door would not open. She had spent the 90 years between that afternoon and this one as the single remaining human witness to what those locked doors had done. She was survived by 1 daughter, 2 sons, 7 grandchildren, and 1 great-granddaughter. Her granddaughter Dana Walden was, at the time of Rose's death, co-president of 20th Century Fox Television. The New York Times obituary, published on February 17, 2001, was headlined, Rose Freedman, last survivor of Triangle Fire, dies at 107. She had been studying her 7th language in the months before she died. When Rose Freedman died on February 15, 2001, the last known living memory of the Triangle Shirtwaist fire died with her. 146 people had died on March 25, 1911, in 18 minutes, in a building in Greenwich Village. The doors were locked. The fire escape collapsed. 62 people fell from the windows. The owners were acquitted. The laws that came after, the sprinkler requirements, the fire drill mandates, the prohibition on locking exit doors while workers were inside, were written in part because one 17-year-old girl had gone up when everyone else went down had refused to change her account of what she had found, and had kept refusing for 90 years. She was not an institution. She was not a monument. She was a girl from Vienna who worked a sewing machine on the 9th floor and came out alive. She spent the rest of her life making sure